The Echo Chamber, brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers. This broadcast from Cannes Lions is brought to you by Ketchum.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. This is Arun Sudhaman, and this is the first of our Cannes special podcasts, which we're bringing to you in conjunction with our partner from Ketchum. And joining us for the first episode on the Monday here on the Croisette, we have two people who also joined us last year, and they have been described to me as two of Ketchum's finest, which I'm sure is true. It's Tera Miller and Ruth Yearley. Tera and Ruth. Tera, I'll come to you first. Could you both please introduce yourselves, tell us what you do, just so our listeners get caught up to speed?
Absolutely. My name is Tera Miller, and I'm a partner at Ketchum and a director of strategic and creative planning. I'm headquartered in the Chicago office, but I work with clients all around the world.
Cool.
I'm Ruth Yearley, and I work out of the London office, and I'm the Director of Insight and Strategy, which in old money is a planner.
Indeed, excellent. So you guys are perfectly positioned, I think, to talk about some of the creative trends that perhaps we're expecting to see this year in Cannes. But I wanted to start with a different question. So this is supposed to be a slimmed-down Cannes. Have you seen any evidence of that so far? Do you think there's less going on? Do you feel there's less sensory overload in store for you this year?
I think I haven't had a chance to go all the way along yet, but the sense I get from talking to people is people are here with more intent. So I think what used to be possibly a bit of a party season is definitely now about insight, elucidation, what I can take back. And very selflessly, I think people are more intent on what they can share with the people who aren't here. So I was very impressed to see the app where you can find out what's going on even if you're not here. So for me, I think people are more focused in getting something out of it. So the intent is probably slimmed down and not so hedonistic rather than the event. I think the event's just going to be as amazing and intense as ever.
Tera?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen is a lot of the action away from the Palais is extremely competitive with what's happening in the Palais. So we've got things like the Girls' Lounge and different events along the different beaches, Google Beach, etc. And I think there's a lot of competition there, and it's a big push-pull to see where you're going to go. Are you going to stay in the Palais? Are you going to end up on a beach and hear a talk there? The talks seem just as compelling outside the Palais as they are inside.
So Ruth, coming back to you, does this mean that you're not partying this year? Is that what I get from reading between the lines?
Well, if you read between the lines and that's what you get, there, you can take that. I'll take that.
No comment.
It depends if my colleagues are hearing this, in which case, no, clearly I'll be in bed by 8 o'clock.
By the time they hear this, I think it might be the point of no return has been reached. Right, let's talk about the creative trends that you're expecting this year in Cannes. Anything that sticks out, having looked at the agenda for the week and some of the work that's already starting to show up on the shortlists?
Well, actually, I was a judge of the PR, and what I'm finding really interesting is the things that we have seen bubbling under for the past few years have now become mainstream. So we all know that Cannes loves a cause, Cannes loves a purpose, but I think that cause and purpose aren't cause and purpose anymore. They're actually very mainstream. They're a table stake for the work. The types of people that we're seeing featured in the work perhaps were marginalised before. So I think that we're seeing, what I call authenticity 2.0. We're seeing more of the real people, more of the real stuff, people with flaws, and I think work that exhibits that, we're going to see more and more of that, keeping it real.
Tera?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with Ruth. I think that, it's just we're seeing more of, I would just say, purpose overall, not necessarily, certainly purpose as it relates to a nonprofit organization or a specific, charitable organization, but also just brands having more purpose in the work that they're doing. We certainly are hoping to see some success in that area, and it's something that Ken has been doing for a long time. I also am seeing some really interesting migration of, I guess I would say, art into real life, because we've been talking at Ken so much about women's issues and gender equality from a marketing standpoint. And now we're seeing the conversation come through in the real lives of the marketers who are here, which is really interesting. So I think there's some mirroring of art and life.
So some really interesting points there that I'll try and get to all of them in due course. Ruth, I just wanted to, well, actually for both of you, I think, because you both mentioned purpose. And I wonder your thoughts in particular as a judge, because there has been a little bit of cynicism from these quarters, perhaps, about the use of purpose to win awards. Do you feel like it is sometimes just a kind of an empty award-winning tactic, or do you feel like there's real substance in the work that you're seeing?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? People don't just do work to win awards. People do work to meet their client's brief and to engage with consumers. And I think if you take the second of those, to engage with consumers now, they expect purpose. They expect brands to act with integrity. They expect brands to reflect their values. So I think that purpose has become something that is demanded in communication, and therefore it makes good work, successful work, and then that gets entered for awards. So I'm not cynical enough to say that people build in purpose thinking they're going to get a lion. I think they build in purpose because it has become a table stake to communicate these days. You just can't get away with the shallowness of communication without something behind it, without standing for something, because that's what consumers expect in their life, and they want that authenticity in their communication.
Tera, do you see brands perhaps jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, and you look at what they're doing and you think that that's not the kind of purpose they should be espousing? It doesn't chime with what this particular company or brand is known for. Do you see much in the way of those missteps?
I'm not going to say that I've seen that. No, I don't think I have. I think that they're getting probably, very good counsel from their agencies. I will say I think I'm a little more cynical than Ruth is, maybe for once.
Usually it's the Brit that's more cynical.
I know, and yes, but I do think though, there certainly can be pandering for awards, and people brainstorming to the point of getting a lion. I completely understand how that could happen. I hope that Ruth's vision is correct, and I do believe that is the direction we should be going. And so, if the desired end result of getting a lion is what people are going for, and they accidentally make the world a better place, then that's fantastic too.
Yeah, I think my suspicion, given your responses, is that certainly in the public relations industry, I don't think you see that kind of let's do this campaign to win a lion, because I don't think PR agencies really have that kind of luxury in terms of the budgets and so on. In the ad industry, I think there may be a different view, but anyway, we can move on from that one. So let's talk about, so both of you mentioned purpose and authenticity in terms of the kind of creative themes that you see emerging. Let's talk about clients for a moment. When it comes to clients kind of reaching that creative breakthrough and for want of a better phrase, signing off on an idea that's actually going to make a change and is actually taking a risk, what do you think they need to do to reach that point? What do you think the obstacles are to getting there?
Well, I think that there's a difference between the client that you have and the client as a collective, i.e. the company they work for. So, any planner, anybody who works in an agency will tell you that what we love is a brave client. And clients do have to be brave. You have to have bravery, you have to have budget. But even if your individual client has that, these days increasingly we're coming up against lawyers. Things get stopped later on down the line, and that is the enemy, I think, of bravery, is that compliance. But there are still some that go for it, and I think they have a struggle getting things through. So how can we help them? We can make sure that everything is grounded in an insight. I'm a believer, as you know, in a very instinctive insight, but data is the minder at the door of bravery now. If you've got data to show that your insight and your strategy are right, that will help them in the boardroom. That will help them be brave. That will help them get land work that's got a cause, because data is the thing that gets things through. And that's how you help them. You make sure that they've got everything they need so that their bravery is substantive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tera?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and I'll just take it, I guess, a slightly different direction, and that is that, our companies, certainly large corporations, they're already involved in what I would, I guess, call purpose marketing, because they're working with foundations from a corporate brand standpoint, and they all have their causes. What they aren't necessarily doing is linking that to their individual brands. And there's kind of a disconnect there. And I think that could be an interesting way to sell things up the chain to a higher level, is finding ways to connect the corporate part of the house to the brand part of the house. There is something, to Ruth's point, which I think was a really good one, about the having the lawyers in the room. We do a workshop for social agility work, and one of the rules that we have is that we need to have the lawyer in the room, because as we're going through and deciding which triggers we're going to pull, what decisions we're going to make when it comes to social agility and what we're going to be listening for, social listening, we need to have the lawyers there so that everybody's on the same page. So we've got the agencies, the brand clients, and the lawyers. Everyone is looking at each other and nodding their heads or shaking their heads either way, which is helpful. So having attorneys in the room early could be a help.
And so is that how you get them on board?
Well, for this particular workshop, yes. I mean, I can't say that I've ever been, for instance, in an integrated planning session when there was an attorney present. But, maybe, I don't know, getting attorneys involved earlier or changing the dynamic altogether could be an interesting thing to do.
Sure.
And I think changing the dynamic of lawyers and procurement in general, I think they've got really hard jobs because they are lawyers and procurers, whatever procurers are, accountants.
That sounds kind of vaguely weird.
Whatever they are, numbers. And they have to really understand what their marketing and communication colleagues do, but also what they're trying to achieve. So again, I think it's really important that in our agency we have creative people at our end who are talking numbers so that they can understand what we're doing and help procurement. I think it's I think the agency really has to help the client.
Yeah.
But that's why you have an agency. They're specialists. And if your accountants in your agency can talk to their accountants and be that bridge between creation, purpose, cause and money, you're going to get the best deal. And the same with lawyers. They've got a hard job. They've got to be helped to help their creatives along.
So what happens when you have a great idea? You're walking to work. That's when you have your best ideas, if I recall correctly. But you don't have the data to support it. Do you still go ahead and present it to the client?
Well, it's interesting you're asking me that, because I'm a massive believer in my data, as you say, is the world. So as I'm walking to work, I'm gathering my data. As I'm listening to Radio 4, I'm gathering my data. So for me, if I have a good idea, it is grounded in an insight. It just may not be grounded in a Mintel report
or spreadsheet.
Absolutely. So there's two things you can do, really. I find it relatively easy to use an analogy or a metaphor, an example. They're human beings, so you can show them, an example from another sphere of life that reinforces this. Or then I can work with a brilliant data analytics team to find data. So yes, my ideas are grounded in data, not necessarily a spreadsheet, you're absolutely right, but there's all, you know what? My theory is subjective thought plus Google equals objective thought.
Excellent. Tera, do you find this a challenge as well in terms of dealing with data, spreadsheet-obsessed clients? My phrase, not yours.
I would say that Ruth definitely is the expert when it comes to intuitive planning. Certainly we use data to make our points, but one of the things that I come across very often, most often in my job, is that I'm planning in concert with other agencies. So it's a pool of data, if you will. It is insights from an ad agency, insights from a media buying agency, from a digital agency, and from us. And, we pool that thought to come together in a best case scenario, I would say, to one conclusion that works for all of us. We are sometimes handed an insight that might be grounded in data, but it is not necessarily a very insightful insight. It's a kind of a fact, but we can work with that too. So data is ideal to have, but I also believe, as Ruth said, we're all out living our lives. If you have your eyes wide open, then you're experiencing the human condition.
So Tera, just staying with you, one of the things you mentioned early on was about how you're seeing conversations here around gender moving on from just being about marketing to actual structural change. And one of the big issues we've seen is that in the advertising industry, the creative roles are still dominated by men, especially towards the top. Do you find that? Do you find a similar issue when it comes to the public relations industry?
Simply put, no.
Okay.
I don't think it is as prevalent. At Ketchum, we have a female global CEO. Ruth is a senior creative. I'm a senior creative. Our head of creative planning is a woman, and we have a lot of peers here who are creative leaders who are women. Our chief communications officer is a woman. So I certainly don't see it at Ketchum, and I think generally it's potentially not as prevalent in PR as advertising. That's not an educated, that's just kind of my feeling about it. But I definitely understand what is happening in the advertising agencies and empathize with that. And I think it's important to have the conversation. I'm looking forward to the, we were just talking about this at dinner, I'm looking forward to the day when we don't have to have the conversation anymore. But for today, it's important. And it's the joke we talk about when you see, everybody going up to accept their lions on the big stage, and it's 6 men and 1 woman, or it still feels very token. So I'm looking forward this year to see if there's more diversity on the stage accepting the awards, even if it is just for show. That's starting something.
Yeah. Ruth, your views on that?
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast for me.
Oh, good. Sounds like you have a lot to say.
Yeah, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. Seriously. I think the UK statistics that came out on the gender pay gap tell you everything you need to know. Never mind roles, never mind lip service. Give us the money that our men are earning. I don't want to earn 20% in the pound less than a man, because I'm not 20% less.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to move on a little bit to some questions around your careers as planners. I wouldn't say planners are, an endangered species in the PR industry, because there's several of you around. But from my observation, it hasn't really. We started seeing planners coming in maybe 10 to 15 years ago in terms of these roles being created, but there hasn't been the deluge of planners at agencies in the way that I think many people expected. Ruth, you're looking at me like I'm completely wrong, which wouldn't be the first time at all.
I looked at you like that, or you were wrong.
No. Maybe both. So, do you want to challenge the premise of the question, we ran a story about this,
Yeah.
I think around a year ago or so, where we were talking about why planning hasn't kind of embedded itself in PR agencies in the way that it has ad agencies. So is that a false comparison to make?
Well, I don't think you can throw a stone in any office now and find somebody who hasn't got strategy or insight in their title. That's what I find, whether they're a data strategist, a data insight, a social strategist. I think everybody, to the counterpoint to you, thinks they're a planner. So
everyone does. Yeah,
everybody thinks
such an easy job.
It's so easy.
Snap.
That's why we earn 20% less than everybody else. Sometimes I just do it before I come to work, as you know.
I mean,
I just do it while I'm walking along. It's
How
so
hard could it
easy.
be?
It's really easy.
You don't need a spreadsheet.
I barely need a desk. So I think I agree with you. There are less people with the title planner. I wonder if there's less people in the whole of communications with the title planner. I think everybody has unpacked planning and taken the part of it they like. So my title is Insight and Strategy because I love insight and I find strategy relatively easy. Mm-hmm. So I think what's happened is, whilst there may be less strategy and planning departments, I think that way of thinking has spread through everybody. So when I joined public relations, and I've been doing it a long time now, people went straight to the idea. They sometimes didn't even go to the idea, they went straight to their Rolodex. How can I get this person?
Yeah.
How can I work with Keanu Reeves? That's where they went. And then that all changed, and everybody understood that they had to have something that was based in research, be that the world or a spreadsheet, have an insight, a strategy before they got to creative. And because we've made everybody realise that that's how you get great work, everybody now thinks like a planner. So it's not separated out as much, but I would have said planning is alive and well. Planners are everybody.
Right, okay. That's a really interesting way to look at it, I think. Tera, your view?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time telling what Ruth's feeling about that trend is, but I will say that am glad for it because we are. I know, Ruth. I know. We are. I mean, listen. Our budgets are smaller than advertising agencies' budgets. We want to get paid for our planning because you're buying our ideas in addition to our expertise and activating the ideas, but we do it on a smaller budget. And I'm just one person. In our office, we have a handful of strategic and creative planners, but it's my goal to educate all of our account people, or a good number of our account people, so that I don't want them to take my job, but I want them to be able to understand it enough that we can kind of share the burden, if I want to call it a burden, but share the job of planning so that everyone understands it. They don't need to understand it equally as a specialist like I do, but if I am a client, I want my client director to fully understand the insight, strategy behind the creative. I think that's really important. So, I mean, I love sharing the job of planning.
Okay, last question for both of you before you melt completely out here. The best idea you ever had that didn't happen? Tara's just shaking her head at this question. You don't want to. You've never had a
I've
great
never
idea.
had a best idea. No, I don't.
You don't want to put it on record.
No. Do you have one,
For
Ruth?
me, it's about having the idea at the wrong time. So it comes right back, Arun, to where we started about people being brave and people being ready. So I'm fascinated by this whole trend to gender neutrality, towards people not identifying as one thing or another. And about 4 years ago now, I had lots of thoughts about labels, and I was pitching for a jeans brand. Labels are for jeans, not for people. Great idea. They won't brave enough to do it. My colleagues weren't brave enough to do it. Now I see it everywhere. So for me, that idea has happened, but it has. I had it too early, almost.
You were ahead of your time.
They're your words, not mine. But I think that's when I think I am most frustrated, when the idea that you have, you see someone else do it and you see them do it later, and that I find that galls me.
It still irks you.
Yeah. Luckily we're on the radio, so people can't see my face. But, yeah.
I think they can tell.
Yeah, a little
Don't
bit
worry.
bitter.
Yeah.
A little bit.
We always know where Ruth stands.
Tera, anything from you?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I will just relate it to something that's happening today. I think that, we've seen, certainly at Cannes, outside of Cannes as well, if you talk about ideas whose time have come, more taboo topics being addressed, or things that might even be uncomfortable. I saw a poster in the Palais just before I came over here about a session, something about getting comfortable about talking about cancer, getting uncomfortable about talking about cancer, but being able to have the conversation. And certainly the Libresse work that we've been doing using real menstrual blood is something that some people would consider to be taboo, and certainly an on the edge idea, but yes, I've had ideas in the past that were, I would call, cheeky and maybe on the edge, but the client just wasn't ready for it. And we do have a lot of conservative clients, and it's my job to push them, but also to understand, where they're coming from and their stakeholders. So I have to be responsible for that as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you both very much. This was lively and as entertaining as always. And I hope you both have a great week here in Cannes.
And you too.
Thank
you
you,
very
Arun.
much, Arun.
You've been listening to The Echo Chamber. Brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by Marketeers. Thanks also to Ketchum for bringing this special series of podcasts to you from Cannes Lions.